If you've played Paper Mario before, then you'll know that it's a very linear game. You don't really have any flexibility in the order you complete the game's chapters. You start off in Chapter 1 and end the game in Chapter 8. You don't really have a choice. Well, what if I told you that that was a lie? What if I told you that this game is so broken, you could beat it in any order you wanted? What if I told you this game was so broken, you could beat it backwards? Well, I'd hope you believe me because it's true. This is Paper Mario Reverse All Cards, a speedrun that forces you to collect Paper Mario's 7 star cards in reverse order, which means you have to beat Chapter 7 first and Chapter 1 last, which I know sounds impossible, and it almost is. As of April 10th, 2024, only 7 people have ever completed a speedrun of this due to its difficulty. It is notorious for having Paper Mario's hardest speedrunning trick. A trick that you not only have to perform once during this run, but twice. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many hard tricks in this run, it's almost hard to count. There's a reason only 7 players have been able to complete it. It's really hard. But I didn't care. I wanted to become the 8th person to beat it. I wanted to be able to put my name on this leaderboard and say that I beat Paper Mario backwards. And as you can probably tell by the title of this video, it did not go well. So come with me now as I take you on the month-long journey that was me trying to complete Paper Mario's hardest speedrun. Before we get started guys, if you like the videos on this channel, please consider subscribing. We're really close to 30k and it'd be awesome hitting it on this video. Thanks. Now, before we actually get into it, let's go over what beating Paper Mario backwards actually looks like. The main goal of the game is to collect these 7 star cards, which are obtained by finishing chapters 1 through 7. Beating the game backwards means collecting the star card in chapter 7 first, then chapter 6, then 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, and finally 1. I mention this because Paper Mario actually has 9 chapters. There are the 7 chapters I just mentioned, plus a prologue and chapter 8. And unfortunately, we can't do prologue or chapter 8 out of order. So beating the game backwards is going to look like this. We do prologue, then chapter 7 through 1, and finish off the game with chapter 8. So it's not technically beating the game backwards, which is why the category is called Reverse All Cards. But it is pretty close. And trust me, it's really fucking cool. So without further ado, let's hop in. So as I just mentioned, we complete the prologue like normal. We go to Peach's castle, fight Bowser, lose to Bowser, help out this old man, and then defeat the Goomba King. It was all done completely like normal. But now that the prologue is out of the way, we can finally get this run started. And the first thing we do is head to chapter 1. And I know what you're thinking. You're supposed to be beating the game backwards. Why are you heading to chapter 1? Well, don't you worry, we'll only be here for a bit. So we head to Koopa Village, save Cooper's shell from the Fuzzy, and then make our way over to the Koopa Bros Fortress. Once we're there, we come across our first trick of this run, Reverse Staircase Skip. Normally to unlock this door, you have to defeat this Koopa, hit the switch that drops down once he's dead that lowers the staircase, and then collect the key that's in the basement. Once you have the key, you can open the door and this cutscene will play. Unfortunately, we can't do that. A big part of this run, which I'll explain more in depth later, is collecting key items. A key item is an item in the game that has no other purpose except for progressing the story. They are completely different from regular items and even have their own tab in the menu. Trust me, this will be important for later. But for now, we have to collect as many key items as we can and we can't really waste them. So to save us from having to use this key to open this door, we have to perform reverse staircase skip. To perform reverse staircase skip, we have to get on top of these stairs, stand on the very edge, jump, then tap down on the joystick, then up. And if you do this right, you will essentially weave your way through the second floor to the basement. When we land in the basement, we will be on this very narrow ledge, which the game considers out of bounds. We can then walk along this ledge until we reach about here. And since we're still considered out of bounds, we can just jump off into the water. And if we do this and hold a very specific angle, we will warp right up to the door and the same cutscene will play. In doing this trick, we actually entered the top door of this room, when we're normally supposed to be entering in the bottom, but it doesn't matter. The game just assumes we entered through the bottom door and just puts us there. And get used to it, because this game assumes a lot of things. Oh, and by the way, this is probably one of the easier tricks in the run, and it probably took me 30 minutes to do this. So, off to a good start. After we enter the room, we hit the switch, drop down, and then save Bombette. And as we leave the room, we can notice that the staircase has mysteriously been lowered. But what's going on? We didn't do that. We used reverse staircase skip. We never touched the switch that lowers the staircase. So, what's going on here? Well, this is our first introduction to story triggers, a mechanic that will play a major role in this run. Basically, these story triggers is how the game keeps track of which part of the story Mario is currently in. And saving Bombette is one of these story triggers. So, even though we never lowered the staircase, as soon as we save Bombette, the game just assumes that since we triggered this part of the story, we must have completed everything prior to it, which includes having this staircase lowered. So we basically got credit for something we didn't do, which is fine by me because this run is hard enough as it is. So anyways, we move on and grab the key that was supposed to be used on that locked door. And now that we have the key, we have everything we need from chapter 1. We really just came here because we needed Bombette, but now that we have her, we can leave. And as I headed back to town, I couldn't help but have a smile on my face. We were already an hour into this run, and aside from the reverse staircase skip, it had been really easy. I was feeling optimistic. I was feeling like I could do this. And with saying that, let's head on to chapter 2. Oh. Oh no. I had completely forgotten about this, but until you finish chapter 1, there are just a bunch of LODs blocking the way to the rest of Toad Town, and our entrance to chapter 2. If these LODs weren't in our way, we could just walk down to the train station and use Bombette to blow up this boulder lodged in front of the train. But unfortunately they are, so we're gonna have to find a way around them. And if you've watched any kind of Paper Mario speedrun before, you probably know what we're about to do. It's a little trick called log skip. To perform log skip, we have to first get out of bounds. To do this, we go inside the bad shop and knock over this carpet. Once the carpet is knocked over, the owner will walk over and try to pick it up. But if we get between him and the carpet, and then jump twice, hammer, and jump again, we can make our way out of bounds. Once we're out of bounds, we can line ourselves up with this sign. We then need to make sure we're on the very edge of the world. The easiest way to do this is fall out of bounds and respawn. Then, we open up our partner menu and hold the joystick in between the positions of down right and down, which is called down down right. Once we fall off, we immediately switch our position to upright. Then, once this little green guy hits the middle of the screen, we switch our joystick to the down position. At this point, if we hold down, Mario will fall indefinitely. Now, we just have to switch our joystick to a position called left, up, left, which is in between left and up, left. If we do that at the right time, the screen will start to move like this. And as soon as it makes this transition, we want to hold upright. And if everything is done correctly, we will hit the loading zone and appear on the other side of the logs. Okay, that's weird. Let's try that again. Down, down, right. up right, down, left, up left. Then up right. Okay, what the hell? Why is this not working? This looks easy. It doesn't seem that hard. Spoiler, it was that hard. Come on, come on. Ah! Why? Why? Oh! Please! Please! Okay, we're doing this one last time. First input, down, down, right. Second input, up, right. Once the bulb is mid-screen, do input 3. Input 3, down. You can hold this direction as long as you want to buffer the next input. Fourth input, hold left, up, left, once the background shifts on the third input. Fifth input, immediately when the background shifts after the fourth input, hold right. So, yeah, that only took 3 hours. Yep, I spent 3 hours falling out of bounds and rotating my joystick like a complete jackass. But either way, it's done and we can move on to chapter 2. But before that, I quickly talked to this bulb guy to get a miracle seed which we will need for later. After that, I blow up the rock in front of the train, then hop on and take it to the dry desert. And as you can see, the title card for chapter 2 plays. So even though we haven't beaten chapter 1, because of this story trigger system, the game now thinks we're in chapter 2. And chapter 2 is a place we don't really want to be yet. All we came here for is Parakarry, and thankfully getting him is pretty easy. We just have to search around Mount Rugged for some lost letters, return him the Parakarry, and he's ours. Before we leave, we talk to another bulb guy and grab another miracle seed. Once we return to town, you can see that the Lauds are no longer there. This is once again because of the story trigger system. Once we took the train, we basically tricked the game into thinking we were in chapter 2. And if you're in chapter 2, the game assumes that the Lauds must have been cleared. So they're just gone when we come back. Okay, so the next thing we have to do is head to chapter 5. But the problem is, the only way to get to chapter 5 is by taking this whale. And he doesn't spawn until chapter 4 is completed. So we're gonna have to find another way. Luckily, there is another way. And it's probably Paper Mario's most famous trick, Blue House Skip. But before we do that, we can actually grab this key that's in the house before we go in. If you hammer in a specific way, your hammer can clip through the wall and touch the key. And honestly, I don't really know how it's done, I just kinda hammered around like an idiot and it eventually worked. But either way, now it's time for the Blue House Skip. To do Blue House Skip, we need to line up with the green toad so our hammer appears just behind him when we use it. Now that we're in the right position, we need to spin, jump left, return the joystick to neutral, jump off the side of the house, then roll the stick up right to up left. Which, honestly, doesn't seem that bad, so let's go ahead and try it for ourselves. Okay, that didn't work. Let's see here. Let's see if there's any tips for learning this online. Oh, right here. When learning Blue House Skip, it is recommended to take it in steps. Okay, cool. First, practice jumping left, such that Mario hits the collision on the side of the building. Okay, we can do that. Okay, seems like we got it down pretty good. Then, start trying to get the second jump. Okay. Alright, seems like we're getting it, now what? Once you can get the second jump with some consistency, start adding the up right to up left movement after the second jump. Okay, we can do this. Let's try. Okay, let's see if there's anything else there. Oh, there's an author's note. Author's note. It took me 3 months to learn this trick. Okay, I think we're gonna try something else. Luckily, there is another way to do Blue House Skip. It's just a lot slower. If we approach these two toads, and this little text bubble pops up above their heads, they will walk towards us. If we get them in the right position, the blue one will push the green one out of its normal walking area, allowing us to lure him over towards the house. Once he's over here, we can then perform an NPC clip. This is done by spinning in between the toad and this ledge and hammering. When Mario uses his hammer, he loses all collision, which allows him to be pushed out of bounds by the toad. Once we're out of bounds, all we have to do is walk towards the blue house and we're in. And since we didn't enter the blue house the normal way, this is all we get to look at. There's a pipe in this room that we need to get down to enter the sewers, but since we can't see anything, getting to it is not easy. I have to jump up and then hold down and just hope I'm on top of the pipe. I cannot stress enough how annoying this was. Not only could I not see, but with my setup, I didn't have sound either, so I couldn't tell what the hell was happening. The only way I could tell that the game wasn't frozen was because I could occasionally see this red exclamation mark when I walked by the door. Other than that, I couldn't tell what was going on. But by some random chance, I found the pipe and made it down to the sewers. After making it to this part of the sewer, we come across our first mini-boss of the run, and honestly, he was super easy. We just power bounced him 3 times and he died. Now, you're probably wondering why we just defeated this random blooper. Well, dear viewer, it's because it gives us a shortcut to Chapter 5. These sewers are filled with pipes to other chapters in the game. Normally, as you progress through the game, you unlock new abilities and find new partners that allow you to progress through the sewers and find more shortcuts. And it's set up so you never find a shortcut to a chapter you haven't been to yet. But we essentially entered it from the back, which you're not supposed to be able to do. So we do have access to chapters we haven't been to yet. As you can see, we can take this pipe and just show up in Chapter 5, even though we're still technically in Chapter 2. And since the game still thinks we're in Chapter 2, we actually have to come over here and talk to Colorado. After we finish talking to him, a cutscene will play that just happens to be a story trigger. So even though we haven't collected a single Star Spirit, the game now thinks we're in Chapter 5. And don't get used to it, because we won't be staying long. The only reason we came here was to pick up sushi and pick up this Power Quake badge. Once we have both, we can leave. Our goal now is to get to Chapter 3. And to do that, we have to go deeper into the sewers, where we find some Dark Koopas. And I haven't really mentioned it yet, but we're a really low level. Remember, we're still supposed to be in Chapter 1, so these enemies are way too tough for us. Luckily, we can make use of our newly found badge. If we use Power Quake twice, we can take care of these Koopas no problem, and doing so grants us access to Chapter 3. And as we enter Bow's mansion, take note of how most of the puzzles are already solved. The weight is already placed on the chandelier, and the bookshelf is moved aside, revealing the door. Because of the Colorado cutscene, the game still thinks we're in Chapter 5. So it just assumes that all these puzzles have been finished already. And here's where things get confusing, so pay attention. So even though the weight's already on the chandelier, we haven't actually gotten it from the chest yet. So it's still in there. And we need to grab it because it helps us get another key item. And that key item is the record. Normally you would get the record from playing in this minigame with the boos, and then use it so you could lure this boo away from the chest and grab the weight. But we can do a trick called record skip to essentially skip using the record and grab the weight without it. By lining up against this wall, spinning, hammering, and then jumping left, we can jump between the boo and the chest. And if we press A quick enough, we can open it before he has a chance to stop us, completing this puzzle without the use of the record. And doing this has a weird property. If we go back to the room where we normally get the record from, it'll just be sitting there on the floor. And it's ours to keep now since we don't have to use it to get the weight. Yes, we did all that just to get another key item. And now that we did, you can see that the game thinks we're in Chapter 3 now. The weight is no longer on the chandelier and the bookshelf hasn't been moved. Luckily, we actually have the weight now, so we can progress through the mansion like normal. We grab the super boots and the portrait ghost and make our way up to Bow. And now that we have Bow, you may think we're about to leave Chapter 3. But there's still one thing we need before we leave. and that's the Mega Rush badge. When Mario is at 1 HP, the Mega Rush badge will boost his attack power by 4. Which may not seem like a lot, but if you combine it with the Power Bounce badge, it can do a ton of damage. It'll make fighting the endgame bosses at such a low level actually possible. So we head into Tubba Blubba's castle, grab the badge, and then leave Chapter 3. And even though we've come across some hitches in the run so far, we've managed to conquer them all. I was starting to feel like the difficulty of this run was maybe a little overblown. I was starting to feel unstoppable. So now that we've gotten all the badges and partners we need, it's time to get to Chapter 7. But the question is, how do we do that? Well, we're gonna abuse the hell out of this volcano escape cutscene. This volcano cutscene plays at the end of Chapter 5. The nice thing about this cutscene is no matter what chapter you're in, when this cutscene plays, it'll advance you to the next chapter. So if we go and talk to Colorado again, the game will think we're in Chapter 5 again. So if we were to trigger this cutscene, the game would advance us to Chapter 6, which is how the game would normally work. But here's where things get freaky. If we were to re-trigger this cutscene now that we're in Chapter 6, it would advance us to Chapter 7. So essentially, this gives us a way to move from Chapter 5 to Chapter 7 without having to defeat a single boss or save a single Star Spirit. But you're probably wondering, how the hell do we re-trigger a cutscene like this? It's a story moment that happens only once in the game. Well, you can. It's just really annoying. But don't let me tell you. Let me show you. So the first thing we have to do is get into the volcano. But we can't do it the normal way, which is by saving all the Yoshi children and having Raphael the Raven build this zipline. Since we don't have Watt yet, it means we can't save the Yoshi children, which means we can't build a zipline. So to get around this lava pit, we're gonna have to get a little creative. If we come over by this tree, hold down, hold left, and then use Parakarry's ability, we can float right over this tree and out of bounds. Game? Hello? Hold down, hold left, and then use Parakarry's ability. Wait, why is this not working? If only I knew what was about to happen. If only I turned back instead of pushing forward. Because little did I know, this was the exact moment this run would go to You see, what I'm trying to do here is called Raphael Skip, and it's only doable in the Japanese version of the game. And for some reason, when I started this run, I didn't think it mattered what version of the game I played on. So, I choose English because that's the version I always play on. And at the time, I could not comprehend the repercussions of this choice. Because this choice didn't end the run right here. It did something much worse. You see, there's another version of the Raphael Skip. A version that's compatible with the English version of the game I'm playing on. That version is called Tree Hop. And no word of a lie, it is the most frustrating thing I've ever done in my life. To perform Tree Hop, you need to come over by this tree and jump up it. Once you're at the top, you have to jump over the tree, which will get you out of bounds. The problem is, doing this is fucking horrible. The part of the tree you can jump on, I swear to God, is like 1 pixel wide. So even just getting on the tree takes forever. Once you're on it though, is where the real fun begins. Because to ascend the tree, you have to perform a series of neutral jumps, which is where you press the A button and then move the joystick after. So you have to press A and then up on the joystick to slowly climb the tree. But these are the most precise jumps ever created by man. You have to be so gentle when doing these jumps, or you'll just fall off the tree. Literally, you cannot move the joystick more than 1 millimeter, or you'll fall. And it's not just going up that you have to worry about. You have to move left as well. And again, you have to be so gentle while doing this. The only way to do it and not fall off is by double tapping Parakarry's ability, which will literally move you like a millimeter to the left. I cannot stress enough how hard this is, and you can make it to the top of the tree and try jumping over and just not make it. This happened to me a bunch of times, but after hours of trying, something finally clicked, and this happened. Oh my god, I did it. Oh god, okay, don't fuck this up. Oh my god, please. Please. Oh, what? No! So, yeah, I didn't even mention this, but this isn't even the whole trick. You still have to perform some out-of-bounds maneuvering to get to the other side of the volcano. And that's not easy either. And if you screw it up, you can pop right back in bounds and have to do the whole thing over again. And this, right here, broke me. I had been jumping at this stupid tree for hours now. I couldn't do it anymore. So, out of desperation, I had to try and do it the regular way. I had to go and save the Yoshis so Raphael could build the zipline. Oh, right. We need Watt to save the Yoshis. Okay, so we could go back to chapter 4 and get Watt then. And then come back here and save the Yoshis and we should be good. So, I went back to chapter 4 and tried to save Watt. There's just one problem. The mini-boss you have to beat to save Watt isn't there. Even though entering the Toy Bots puts us in a chapter 4 state, it's not the right state. I don't really understand it, but there are certain story triggers in the game that are more important than others. Certain triggers that will do things like bring back bosses. And there's only one trigger in chapter 4 that will do that, which is getting this pan from this chest. And this is something we can only trigger once per file. And we're gonna need to trigger it when we come back to chapter 4 to beat it for real. So, we can't get Watt, which means we're stuck. Well, we do have one option. We could start a new file on the Japanese version of the game, which would mean we would have to start over and have to do all those hard tricks again. But at least we wouldn't have to hop up that f***ing tree. So that's what I did. 10 hours of progress down the drain. I did the reverse staircase skip, log skip, blue house skip, and record skip all over again. I got right back to where I was, and thankfully it didn't take 10 hours this time. And guess what? I was able to do the Raphael skip first try. Something that had taken me multiple hours to do with the tree hop method, I was able to do in seconds with the Parakarry clip method. Now that it was done, all I had to do was maneuver out of bounds to get to the other side of this pit, and get to the volcano. So now that we're in the volcano, we basically progress through it like normal. We grab the Ultra Hammer and follow Colorado until we reach this spot here. In a regular playthrough, we could talk to Colorado and then go back to the previous room and fight the boss. But if we fight the boss, then we'll beat chapter 5, which we obviously can't do. So we perform another NPC clip. But instead of on a Toad this time, we use Colorado. We spin, hammer, and then clip out of bounds. And then hold down right, then down left to take the loading zone to the next room, which is the room we would go to after beating the boss. Now that we're here, we can go up the stairs and trigger the cutscene. Even though we didn't beat the boss, the game now thinks we're in chapter 6. But we don't want to be in chapter 6, we want to be in chapter 7. So guess what? We have to head back to the volcano. But luckily, since we're in a chapter 6 state, Raphael the Raven has already built the zipline. So we don't have to pull any shenanigans getting back into the volcano. But while being in chapter 6 makes some things easier, it makes others way harder. Since we're no longer in chapter 5, Colorado will no longer follow us into the volcano. And I don't know if you remember, but we needed him to perform the NPC clip to get out of bounds. But now that he's not here, we can't do that clip. Luckily for us, there's a much harder trick we can use to get through this wall. It's called Sushi Peach Warp, and it's pretty involved. First, we have to make sure we have Bombette out. Then, we need to fall off this ledge onto this spring. You're normally not supposed to be able to fall in the spring from above, so it puts the game in a very weird state. Once we do that, we have to spin jump into the save block. If we miss, which is very easy to do, mind you, we soft lock the game. Which I did many times. If we do it right though, the TET spots to save the game will appear, but we'll still be able to move around. We then have to open the partner menu, then clear the save bot's test. The partner menu will open up again, and we have to arrow down to Sushi's name. Once there, we need to use Bombette's ability, then quickly spin jump. If everything was done correctly, we will take the loading zone, and Sushi will look like he does when he's swimming in water. Now, just based off how complex this trick looks, you would think that it would have taken me a long time to pull it off. But it only took me about an hour, which is still a long time, but compared to 3 or 4 like some other tricks, it wasn't that bad. But yeah, this trick basically allows Sushi to swim anywhere, even in midair and through walls. And look what happens when we go into this room. We basically have no collision when we're in this state. And since we have no collision, we can just swim right through the wall that we NPC clipped through earlier. It's a little awkward getting up these stairs, but once we do, we can re-trigger the cutscene and advance ourselves to Chapter 7. And I hope you're not tired of the volcano yet, because we'll be coming back here a lot more. And by coming back here a lot more, I mean literally right away. Because I lied. We don't need to be in a Chapter 7 state. We need to be in a post-Chapter 7 state. But before we do that, we need to quickly grab a badge from Flower Fields. And if you're wondering why we're in Flower Fields, it's because the game thinks we just completed Chapter 6. So we quickly head up the beanstalk and grab the S Jump Charge badge, which when used will cause Mario's jump power to go up by 3. And yes, this stats with Mega Rush and Power Bounce. So with these 3 badges, we can do massive amounts of damage to enemy bosses. Okay, so where was I? Oh yeah, back to the volcano. And this trip will be exactly the same as our second trip, which means we have to do the Sushi Peach Warp again. But this time, it didn't take me an hour. It didn't even take me 10 minutes. I did it on my first try. I know, thank you. I'm amazing, thanks. We then quickly re-trigger the cutscene again, and since the game thinks we're in Chapter 7, after the cutscene, it advances us to Chapter 8. Which is why when we come back, we're talking to the Star Spirit you saved after beating Chapter 7. Wait, isn't our goal to get to Chapter 7? Why would we want to be in Chapter 8? Well, dear friend, we're gonna abuse some more story triggers. Remember how Chapter 4 had that special story trigger that respawns bosses? Well, Chapter 7 has one as well, and it's when you first enter the Crystal Palace. Once per file, when you enter through these doors, the game will reset you to a Chapter 7 state. And even though we've technically beat Chapter 7 according to the game, we never walked through these doors. But as soon as we do, we will be in Chapter 7. And after hours and hours of hard tricks and a reset, we are finally able to start our first chapter. And honestly, it goes pretty smoothly. We have everything we need to beat the chapter without an issue. Even though we're still missing Watt and Lackluster, they both aren't needed to progress through the chapter. We're also supposed to have the Ultra Boots to hit these switches, but we can just use the Super Boots we obtained in Bow's Mansion, and it works the same. There are some tough fights in the Crystal Palace because we're so under-leveled still, but since the game thinks we've beaten Chapter 7, we actually have the special move Up and Away, which basically just deletes enemies off the screen, so we can use it to our advantage. Even the Crystal King isn't too bad. There's a pretty safe strategy to beat him even at our low level. First, we go into the fight at 10 HP. Then, we supercharge Mario's jump, and do nothing with Bow. Then, if we block each one of his 3 ice shots, it'll put us perfectly into peril, which will activate our Mega Rush badge, giving us 4 extra attack power. Then, we charge up again and do nothing with Bow again. We don't have to worry about the Crystal King attacking this turn, because when he has no ice minions like this, he will always spend the turn spawning more. We then spend another turn charging up and use Bow's move Out of Sight, which makes Mario invulnerable for 1 turn. So he misses his attack, and we use a Jamming Jelly to recover FP, then he wastes another turn spawning his ice friends. We then spend another turn using our charge up and Out of Sight combo. He attacks again and misses. And then we charge up one last time and he spawns more minions. Finally, it's time to attack. We unleash a devastating 5 jump multi-bounce, which does a staggering 85 damage to him in 1 turn. Since the Crystal King only has 70 HP, he dies right away. And we get our first star card. 1 chapter down, 6 more to go. As we come back from the Peach gameplay, you'll notice a familiar cutscene. But instead of going right to the Crystal Palace this time, we head left and go back to Toad Town. And our goal, now that we've beaten Chapter 7, is to beat Chapter 6. But since we just beat Chapter 7, the game now thinks we're in Chapter 8. So we have to make the game think we're in a state before Chapter 6. And there's only one way to do that. And it's the hardest trick that a human being could reasonably do in this game. It's a trick called Early Whale. But before we talk about the trick, let's first talk about what it does. It basically allows us to exit this whale's mouth. And this is something you only do when you beat the mini-boss Fuzzipede. And you only beat this mini-boss when you're in Chapter 5. So whenever you leave this whale's mouth, the game will assume you're in Chapter 5. And you can do this as many times as you want. It is infinitely repeatable. Problem is, like I mentioned before, it is extremely difficult. To even begin doing Early Whale, we have to start off by abusing LZS, or Loading Zone Storage. Loading Zone Storage is a notorious mechanic in Paper Mario speedrunning. Basically, Mario will take a loading zone if he's walking on the ground for 2 frames. So, if you touch a loading zone for 1 frame and jump, you can store this loading zone. As long as you don't touch the ground for longer than 1 frame, you can move anywhere with the loading zone stored. And the reason speedrunners do this is because of a weird property of loading zones. Mario's position when he enters a loading zone will determine what angle he enters the next room from. If you change Mario's position enough, you can skew this angle so much that he falls out of bounds in the next room. Which is exactly what we use it for here. But let's go back to the LZS for a second, because I don't think you appreciate how hard it is to pull this off. Paper Mario runs at 30 frames a second, which means you can only be on the ground for 1/30th of a second, which means it's a frame perfect jump. And not just one jump, you have to do multiple frame perfect jumps to get to the right spot. And it's not just the jumps, you have to move as well. Every time you hit the ground for that 1 frame, you have to move the joystick in the direction you want to go. But you can't hold it, because it will cause Mario to walk, which will cause the LZS to fail. So you have to push the joystick in the direction you want to go, and then return it to neutral all in 1 frame. Which means you have to do 2 frame perfect inputs every time you want to move. And to do this trick, you have to jump like 10 times, which means you have to do 20 frame perfect inputs to pull it off. 20 separate inputs that you have 0.03 seconds to pull off. Guys, I tried this for hours, and I think my record was like 2. I just couldn't do it. And maybe if this was all you had to do, I would have kept trying. But this is just the first part of the trick. There's a whole second half that you can screw up and have to do the whole LZS trick over again. And not only that, but you have to do the early whale trick not once, but twice in the run. 2 times. I couldn't even do 2 jumps. There was no way I was doing this. But I had already put so much time into this run and into this video that I didn't want to give up yet. But early whale was the only way I could revert the game to a chapter 5 state. So I had to find a way to do early whale. And I did. But what I had to do changed me as a person. It filled me with so much shame that I would never be the same again. I had to use a practice ROM. If you're unaware of what a practice ROM is, it's basically a version of the game that has features like save states that would help a speedrunner practice hard tricks like this. The Paper Mario practice ROM has something called Easy LZS, which basically allows you to perform loading zone storage without all the frame perfect jumps. It makes it easy. Guys, I debated for a long time whether or not I should use this, but ultimately I decided to do so. And this is where I reached my lowest point. Not only had this run taken hours of my life and destroyed my sanity, but it had also taken my pride. The one thing I tried to maintain throughout all of this was gone. I used Easy LZS to get out of bounds. And after that, I don't know, I just couldn't look at myself the same anymore. But hey, we still have the second part of the trick to do, so let's get into that. So once we do the LZS, we end up on the other side of these boxes. Once we're there, we have to walk down this very narrow ledge. Then jump out of bounds, hold down right, immediately move slightly right of the down right notch, then slightly down of the down right notch. Then finally return to down right. And if everything is done right, you'll land on the other side of the loading zone, on this other narrow ledge. And it's super narrow. It's very easy to fall off and come right back in bounds. But if we follow it all the way down without falling off, we can just come right over here and walk right on the water. And if we just walk straight into the back of the whale, we can hit the loading zone and go into his mouth. All we have to do now is walk out and we're in chapter 5. Unfortunately, we still have one more thing to do before we can get to chapter 6. We have to quickly go to the Forever Forest and collect the last miracle seed. Once we do that, we can plant them and just open the door to Flower Fields. And in Flower Fields, there are no tricks. There are no glitches. We just play through the chapter like you normally would in a casual playthrough of the game, which is honestly so refreshing at this point. We get our cloud partner Lackey Lester and make it to the boss. And unfortunately, when I was fighting Huff and Puff, I died, so I had to reset. And I didn't notice, but after I reset, OBS just stopped recording. So I have no footage of the fight. But I will show you footage of MX4's run because the fight is the exact same. First, you use your charge jump, then out of sight. Then you charge jump again and take 4 damage from his wind attack. Then charge a third time, swap out to paracarry, and block his body slam so it only does 5 damage. This will put us into peril and once again activate Power Rush. On the next turn, you can use Power Bounce to deal 70 damage to him. And since he only has 60 HP, it kills him in one shot. And with that, another chapter goes down. And it's time to move on to chapter 5. And since we just beat chapter 6, we're once again in a chapter 7 state. Which is why we have to do early whale a second time. So, with the help of Easy LZS, we do early whale a second time and revert our story progress back to chapter 5. Now, since we're still in Toad Town, we actually have to get back to Lava Lava Island. So, we have to do Blue House Skip again. But luckily, this time we have Lackluster. And with Lackluster, we can do something called Lackey Clip. If we stand right at the corner of where these two walls meet, and then use Lackluster's ability, we will just clip right into the house, which makes Blue House Skip so much easier. We still have to deal with the shit where I can't see anything, but after a while we find the pipe and head down. We eventually make it back to Lava Lava Island and see Sushi just sitting there waiting for us, even though we already have him as a partner. So now, we have to make it back to the volcano for, what, a 4th time? 5th time? I don't know. But we still don't have Watt, so we still can't save the Yoshi kids. So, we have to perform our old friend Raphael Skip. Luckily, the practice ROM is the Japanese version of the game, so we can just perform the Parakarry clip. If it wasn't, you would not be seeing this video right now. I will tell you that much. So, we do the skip and make our way into the volcano. And once again, we can just play through the chapter normally from here. We already have the Ultra Hammer, so we can just blow right through it until we reach the boss. And just like the previous two, we have a strategy to beat him. If we go into the fight with Peril, we can power bounce him right away, dealing 28 damage. We can then switch our partner to Sushi and let the Lava Piranha kill us. Thankfully, we have a Life Shroom, which will restore us back to 10 HP, which is the perfect amount to get us back into Peril when he uses his other 2 attacks. Then we power bounce him again, dealing 22 more damage, which puts him into his 2nd phase. In this phase, any kind of water attack will paralyze the Lava Piranha, so we use the Sushi Squirt ability on his main head. I'm sorry, that didn't sound right. But yeah, we do that, power bounce him again, and then on his turn, his main head can't attack, and his small heads just shoot out these cherry bombs. And then with one more jump, we kill him, and save our 3rd Star Spirit completely out of order. Hey guys, guess what? We don't have to do any insane traits to get to Chapter 4. There's no more whale skip, we're done! Literally, all we have to do is make our way back to town and hop in the Toy Bots. That's it. We're now in Chapter 4. And even though we're in Chapter 4, the game still thinks we're in Chapter 6. So, everything in Chapter 4 is completed. Normally, when you do this chapter, you have to fit all the train tracks so you're able to get to each station. But everything is already fixed for us, so we can go to any station we want. But first, Chapter 4 is filled with a ton of key items. So we have to go around collecting as many of them as we can because we still need to fill up our key item slots. I don't know if you forgot, but yeah, that's still a thing. We still need 32 key items, and it'll become obvious why soon. Like this cookbook that's just sitting there where that fat shy guy normally is. We then collect a bunch more until we reach this frying pan which I was talking about earlier. When we open up this chest and get this frying pan, we will be returned to a mid-Chapter 4 state, which will allow us to save Watt and beat the chapter boss. So that's what we do. We grab the frying pan and fight the mid-boss who has Watt kept hostage. All we do in this fight is charge up our jump, block his first attack so it does 4 damage, and swap out Parakarry for Gambario, then let him hit us for 5 damage which puts us into Peril. Gambario can then head bonk his lantern, lighting up the room so we're able to attack him. Then we attack him with all our power. Okay, that wasn't supposed to happen. Alright, let's try that again. So, we do everything again and actually attack the Lantern Ghost this time, and deal 63 damage with 6 power bounces, killing him instantly. Which finally grants us our final partner, Watt. After that, we have nothing left to do but take out the chapter boss. Which is exactly what we do. We once again go into the fight with Peril, and take care of the first Shy Guy wave with a single jump and Watt attack. Next, General Guy brings out his Shy Guys on stilts, which we can take care of with one Power Quake. And even though we've been underleveled for most of this run, it's now come to the point where we're getting too powerful for this game. Power Quake is a badge you're not supposed to get until Chapter 5, and it completely obliterates his Shy Guys. Next comes out the Shy Guy stacks. We can kill one of them with a single jump, and then we can use Watt's Power Shock move to stun the other one so it can't attack, which we can then kill on the next turn. And then we can take out General Guy with a Power Bounce Electro Dash combo, ending a very easy chapter and granting us our 4th out of order Star Spirit. Now we move on to Chapter 3. And since we already completed half of it to grab the Power Rush badge earlier, it should be a pretty quick chapter. So we head back down the shortcut in the sewers and zoom through the Gusty Gulch. And shortly after, we arrive at Tubba Blubba's castle. And the first thing you'll notice is that there's no enemies. Since we're in a Chapter 5 state, the game thinks we've already beaten Chapter 3. So the castle is completely vacant. There are no guards in the halls, this room that normally houses an army of Clubbas is completely empty, and this sequence where you're supposed to hide from Tubba Blubba just doesn't happen. So with no obstacles in our way, we make it to Yakety, the talking key that hides Tubba Blubba's secret. And normally when you enter this room, a cutscene will play where Tubba Blubba comes in and falls asleep. But since we're not in a Chapter 3 state, he doesn't show up for us. The bed is just empty. Thankfully for us though, Yakety is a story trigger. So as soon as we open up this chest, we will be reverted back to a Chapter 3 state. But since Tubba Blubba wasn't there before we opened the chest, he's just invisible now. You can see his sleep bubble just floating in midair while his bed is completely empty. Luckily, as soon as we leave the room, everything goes back to normal and we can see him again. We escape and quickly race down to the windmill to face off against his heart. And, to be honest, it's not much of a face-off. We kill him with 2 power bounces and a shell shot. We are way too overpowered for this point in the game, so every enemy going forward is basically going to be a joke. Tubba Blubba especially. We do a single normal jump and he goes down. Ending Chapter 3, our shortest chapter by far. With only 2 more Star Spirits to go, we head back down the sewers, fight a blooper, then take the shortcut to Dry Outpost. And since we had just beaten Chapter 3, most of Chapter 2 is already done for us. The ruins have already risen from the sand, so we can basically skip the entire first half of the chapter. And even when we enter the ruins, most of the puzzles are already done. Normally with these rooms here, you're supposed to hit a switch in the rooms above to make the sand fall down. But as you can see, it's already been done for us and we can just quickly grab the keys, which helps us reach the important key item total of 32. And since we want to keep as many key items as possible, we don't really want to be unlocking doors in the ruins. Which is why we have to perform a trick called Clippy. To perform Clippy, we need to open up the partner menu on the 2nd frame of an encounter, then run from the battle and swap out our partner as soon as the battle ends. If done correctly, it'll change Mario's hitbox from one that's cylindrical to one that's a flat plane. And since Mario's hitbox is way smaller than it normally is, we can just clip through walls now. If we just walk into this wall near the door, we can phase right through it and fall out of bounds. We will then spawn in the wall, and from here we can just walk through the rest of it and take the loading zone. Apparently, this trick is really hard to pull off. Pulling up the partner menu during the encounter is a frame perfect trick, and I'm sure we all remember how annoying frame perfect tricks can be. But somehow I managed to get it on my 2nd try. I don't know, don't ask questions, just go with it. So now, we're in the same situation we were in Chapter 3. The game doesn't really think we're in Chapter 2 yet, so we have to convince it that we are. And unfortunately, the only way to do that is by grabbing the Super Hammer. And when we grab the Super Hammer, it actually overwrites our Ultra Hammer, which is going to cause us problems later, but unfortunately we have to do this. if we don't grab the Super Hammer, the star card won't spawn after we beat Toot and Koopa. Which means we won't be able to complete this run, so unfortunately, it's a necessary evil. And at this point in the run, I was feeling good. After the hell that was Early Whale, the last 3 chapters had gone off without a hitch. We only had one more chapter to do in reverse, and then chapter 8, which can be done like normal. After many hours and 2 complete resets of the run, I could finally see a light at the end of the tunnel. We were almost done. So, after we completed chapter 2, we went and grabbed our last key item from Goomba. By receiving the tape from Goomba, we now have 32 key items, which is needed for this mysterious trick at the end of the run. Which honestly, I haven't even seen yet, so we're gonna find out about this together. No, another LZS? Oh my god, what the f***? What is this? Oh my god, no! No! Yeah, this trick is an absolute nightmare. But before we go into how hard it is, let me first explain what's happening. The number of regular items you can hold at one time in this game is 10. If you pick up an item while your inventory is full, the game will pull up this menu asking you which item you want to throw away. Now, key items are stored directly above regular items in the game's memory, and since the max number of key items you can hold at one time is 32, when you pick up a 33rd key item, the game will treat it like a regular item and open up this menu to toss one away. And luckily, the 33rd key item we need is sitting in this tree, in the room you first find the hammer in. So if you hit the tree and pick up the dolly, the game will treat it like a regular item and you'll have the option to throw it away. If you throw it enough times, you can get it on top of the save block. Once that's done, you can perform something called a Kooper Super Jump. By doing the LZS and falling out of bounds earlier, you basically store the upwards momentum the game gives you to bring you back into bounds. If you use Kooper's ability, you can unleash that stored momentum and go flying into the air. And if you do it under the save block that has the dolly on top of it, you will clip through the block and hit the dolly, which will bring up this menu again. And as long as this menu is open, you will ascend infinitely into the air. If you leave it open for about 10 to 15 seconds and then close it, you will come crashing back down to the ground with all this enormous speed built up. You'll be going so fast, in fact, that you'll clip through the ground and travel 1,000 units down, which happens to be where Junior Troopa is stored when he's not in use. And by knocking into him, you'll get into a battle. The same battle you fight right after getting the hammer at the start of the game. This fight, and this fight alone, is the only thing that can re-trigger the prologue, and make the game think you're in a state before Chapter 1. And if this seems really complicated and hard to pull off, it's because it is. Remember how I said the tree hop was the most frustrating thing I've ever done in my life? Well, it was. Until I tried to re-trigger the prologue. This trick is pure evil. Not only do you have to perform an LZS to even get it started, a trick so hard I can't even do, mind you, you have to then throw this dolly on top of the save block, which is 100% RNG. It is completely random which way and how far Mario throws the dolly. He'll only ever throw it left and right, but it's completely random which way it goes. Oh, and I lied. Each time he throws it a little bit towards the screen. And he can never throw it away from the screen, so if the dolly gets past the save block, you'll have to reset. And do the LZS all over again. Oh yeah, and if you jump at any point, you'll use the momentum stored from the LZS, so once again, you'll have to start over. And jumping is very easy to do when you're constantly spamming the A button to throw the doll. I have hours of footage of me just throwing this stupid fucking doll. Hours. And after spending the entire night trying to do it, I went to bed and came back the next morning. And then this happened on my first try. Somehow that f***ing doll landed right on top of the save block. I then did the Kooper super jump and traveled 1,000 miles into the air. I then closed the menu and came crashing down into the Earth's crust and cracked Junior Troopa right on his stupid little head. And obviously the fight was easy. It's supposed to be the first fight of the game, so we do one jump and kill him instantly. And on our way back to Goomba Village, we come across this gate. And if we try to open this gate, it crashes the game. And it's probably because the game thinks we're in Prologue and we have multiple things we shouldn't have yet. Like, all the partners, multiple badges, Super Hammer, you get the point. Thankfully, we can do another Lackey clip and just pass right through the gate, foregoing any need to open it at all. We take the pipe back down to the sewers and then take the shortcut to the Koopa Bros Fortress, and proceed to absolutely ass blast through Chapter 1. Since Retrigger Prologue already puts us in the correct state, we don't really have to do anything special. We can just play through the chapter normally and absolutely destroy the Koopa Bros, which grants us our last star card. We did it! Guys, we did it. We beat Paper Mario backwards. The hard part is over. Is what I wish I could say. Unfortunately, we're in a Chapter 2 state right now. And to beat the game, we need to be in a Chapter 8 state. So if you've been paying attention this whole time, you'll know what that means. Back to the volcano. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, re-triggering this cutscene will complete whatever chapter the game thinks we're in. Luckily, going back to Lava Lava Island and talking to Colorado puts us in a Chapter 5 state. So we don't have to start all the way back from Chapter 2 and go in the volcano like 6 times. But we do have to do it 3 times, so buckle up because we're going back in. So we once again have to perform the Raphael skip because we're technically in Chapter 5, so the zipline isn't built yet. Once we do that, we get in the volcano and then come across another roadblock. Since we had to get the Super Hammer in Chapter 2 to progress the chapter normally, we lost our Ultra Hammer. And you can only get the Ultra Hammer once per playthrough. And we need to break this Ultra Block here to progress further into the volcano. And without the Ultra Hammer, we only have one option. And that option is Ultra Hammer Skip. If we come over towards these rots here and do a Lackey clip, we can get out of bounds. Once out of bounds, we have to walk off the ledge, hold upright, then return the joystick to neutral as Mario flies off the screen. If done right, we will land in this little area out of bounds here. We then have to walk left and fall onto this even smaller out of bounds area. And then carefully walk down to the right until our nose touches this wall. Then we have to jump, hold right, and then hold down right, which will trigger the loading zone, skipping us right past the Ultra Block. We then, once again, have to do the NPC clip on Colorado, skipping us past the Lava Piranha fight and getting us to the final room, which progresses us to Chapter 6. But Chapter 6 isn't Chapter 8, so we gotta head back again. Luckily, now that we're in Chapter 6, the zipline is already built. And the Ultra Block is gone because the game thinks we're in Chapter 6, and to be in Chapter 6, you would have to break the Ultra Block first. One downside to being in Chapter 6 though, is that Colorado isn't here with us anymore. So we can't do the NPC clip to get to the final room. To get around this problem earlier in the video, we used the Sushi Peach Warp. But thankfully, since we have Lackey Lester, we can do the Lackey Lester Peach Warp, which is significantly easier. All we have to do is come by this corner here, spin, hammer left, then use Lackey's ability. We will then clip out of bounds and fall through the floor, which at this point we have to hold down to avoid soft locking the game. We then get teleported right back to where we were and have to do the same thing again. But this time, instead of holding down, we have to hold left and then switch to down right as Mario reappears at the top of the screen, which will trigger the loading zone and take us to the next room. We then have to perform a Lackey teleport, which is done by dismounting him, moving right towards this edge, and then using his ability to clip through it. We then have to fall right, then hold up to avoid a soft lock where the star card would normally be. And maybe this doesn't seem easier than Sushi Peach Warp, but trust me, It is. But yeah, we trigger the cutscene again, which puts us into Chapter 7. So now we have to get back into the volcano one last time. But since we're in Flower Fields now, we have to get back to Lava Lava Island, which means we have to do Blue House Skip again. Thankfully, we can just do the Lackey clip again, but unfortunately, I still have to deal with this bullshit where I can't see or hear what I'm doing. But eventually, I find the pipe and we make it all the way back to the volcano. And this trip is exactly the same as the last trip, so I won't go into it much. We just have to do the Lackey Peach Warp again and trigger the cutscene, finally putting us into Chapter 8. Listen, I wish I could tell you that Chapter 8 was some epic conclusion, but it wasn't. I basically just completed it like normal. I did do this cool trick that skips this whole underground section in Bowser's Castle, and did this Kooper super jump that grabs this key early, but other than that, it was basically like a normal playthrough. Even the Bowser fight wasn't really interesting. I just leveled up a bunch and whooped his butt. But damn it, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And this journey was fucking crazy. Think about all we did to get here. Staircase skip, log skip, Blue House skip multiple times, this trick which I forget the name of, spending 5 hours hopping up this fucking tree, realizing I couldn't do it and then starting over on the Japanese version, Sushi Peach Warp, going into the volcano like 17 times, beating bosses way under leveled, Clippy? Okay, Clippy was actually not that bad. Having to do the hardest trick in the game twice, which I couldn't even do, so I had to restart a second time. And to top it all off, this fucking abomination of a trick, which no human should ever have to do. Ever. Ugh. Guys, I'm tired. This was such a massive undertaking. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. If I knew how hard this was gonna be, I probably would have never done it. But anyways, I want to start ranking these challenge videos just to give people an idea of how hard they are. And this is a 10 out of 10. This is harder than beating Pikmin 1 with only yellows and blues. If you valued your mental health, please don't ever attempt this. And if you're a psycho and somehow made it to the end of this video, please subscribe. It won't make the pain go away, but it'll help.